What's up, everybody?
Hi, we're back.
Happy Thursday. Wow, it's Thursday already. Okay, so now that it's coming to the end, tonight is the last night of the tour. I gotta say, I've been a little bit exhausted by the rigorous schedule. It's been really fun, don't get me wrong. I've been a little bit exhausted by it, but now I'm kind of sad.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a reincarnation of this for sure.
That's the first thing. So two things. I'm not going to forget to mention the beautiful t-shirts that are now available on the website as of today. So get you one. We already sold like 20 or so of them, so they're not going to last very long. It doesn't appear. I think we have, like, after we take out the few that I need to take out, we probably have like 80. So there's not very many. Get one while they last. We're not going to make another one. And then the second announcement before we get started tonight is that we are going to have an encore. I'm not going to tell you when it's going to be, but there's going to be an encore episode of the Never Leaving Home tour. Keep an eye on your social feed in the next few weeks or the next couple of weeks, and we'll make an announcement about that. But God, I just have to say thank you guys again. I know we've said this many times, but this has just been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Ash, for doing this. For me, this has been so out of the box and out of my comfort zone. I've never done anything quite like it. Without you having the idea and making this happen, it just never would have happened. It's been really awesome.
And I have to give a shout out to Spencer, my right hand, the gear dude. And Spencer, if it wasn't for our dream team, like dreaming this up together, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, I remember sitting in the car talking about this and coming up with the name with you on Zoom. So anyway, yeah, it's definitely been a team effort and it's been super fun. There's a lot we've learned from it, and I just can't wait to share with you guys during the encore what the next evolution is going to be. We've been thinking a lot about that. But okay, we should get started so we don't keep our guests waiting for too long. We are bringing on Quinn Cody tonight, and we're so excited to talk to this all-star about his racing career, KTM. We're going to talk about so many different things.
We're gonna move around, and I'm once again, so obviously racing superstar, very interested to hear about winning the Baja 4,000 4 times.
1,000.
What did I say?
4,000.
4,000 one time. Was it 4,000 one time or 1,000 4 times? And I keep mangling the race names, and how we got into ADV, but then also I'm very, very curious about how product development works at KTM.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be really.
Without further ado, let's bring on Quinn. I thought it was better to do it this way than have Quinn sitting there the whole time. Quinn, what's up?
What's happening?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Oh my gosh, it worked. Here we are.
We're on.
Hey, I just want to say it wasn't me that screwed it up last week, okay?
It's true.
It was us. It was Zoom. It was Zoom.
Yeah, I'm like, it wasn't even us. I mean, I think this just has to happen. There's no way that you can have like 13 or 14 of these episodes without having a massive failure on one of them. I mean, I thought about it last week and I was like, God, news anchors. It's like when the news anchor is sitting there and they're like picking their nose and the guy has this screen on and they're like, God, what's wrong with you? It's like their ego that's getting into it. So when I was giving myself such a hard time last week, I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. This is like how it goes. But thanks for sticking with us, Quinn.
Yeah, thank you for making yourself available again for this. I know you're busy.
No worries.
Yeah.
So
Glad to be here.
where are you right now?
What's that?
Where are you right now?
So I'm at work. I had to come back into the office workshop this afternoon because I'd have kids crawling all over me right now, and I couldn't get away from them in our house. So I had to come in and back to work.
Okay, and you're in California. You're at KTM US headquarters.
That's right. So yeah, I'm in the R&D workshop. So we have a small R&D facility just down the street from the main headquarters of KTM. So this is like where we do all of our product development testing on the US side here in Marietta.
We're going to ask a bunch of questions about that, but I'm curious, what just at the high level, so what does KTM's North American complex look like? What's the presence here?
So gradually over the last 10, 12 years, we've kind of taken over a whole, industrial complex. It started out with just one relatively small building. We took over the building next door and then the building across the street. And now we have quite a large portion of the industrial complex. And we're kind of outgrowing our current facility pretty rapidly. So There's talk of maybe doing something down the road to have one big complex, but we're still, working within our little facility.
How many people, roughly how many people are down there?
It's a good question. So I think full-time in Marietta, I want to say there's about 150 people.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but and then we have, of course, the parts distribution warehouse in Ohio, where they do all the parts distribution and a lot of the logistical stuff over there.
And are people still? How have you guys been handling the COVID situation?
So initially we shut down. They basically sent everybody home. People that could work from home, sales and accounting and things like that were working from home. R&D we shut down. Racing shut down because obviously there's no racing going on. And then we've kind of gradually started to ramp back up. Austria started, R&D started about 2 weeks ago in Austria. So I was able to come in and start working, and now we have most of our team back to nearly 100% here in R&D. And racing is starting to ramp back up because we had a first GNCC last weekend, and then Supercross is going to start in Salt Lake City at the end of the month. So
Supercross, when I talked to Simon, he was kind of explaining to me, I said, well, is it going to be like a UFC? How I think UFC was the first sport to kind of open back up since COVID. And they're like, okay, we're having the fights, but no crowd. And Supercross, I'm guessing, is the same way.
Yeah, so from what I understand, they're going to go in, they're going to build a track in the stadium in Salt Lake City. Everyone, all the race team, mechanics, staff have to go there, get tested. Then they're basically isolated around the facility. They can't leave. And they're going to start with Wednesday and Saturday races. And they're going to just keep it going and finish off the last 7 rounds. The track builders will probably change the track in between, no spectators. And it's going to be really exciting, I think, to have racing 2 days a week.
Yeah, totally.
We're gonna come back around to KTM. I think we're gonna go. I don't know if you've watched any of our other live streams, but we really are always very interested in learning about you and your background, and kind of, I'm sure everybody out there thinks that what you do is probably like the coolest job in the entire fucking world, and so they're all gonna be asking themselves, how did you get there? And
dude,
we're gonna try to answer that question for them.
I think that our job is cool, but I'm like, I don't know, Quinn's job is pretty cool.
So you probably your job, so you probably hear that all the time, and you're like, oh, you have no idea. but let's just allow it to be a dream job for now. We'll come back around to that. So but I would love to learn more about, because you had this incredible racing career, and then we don't know a lot about your background before that. So where are you from originally? Where are you from?
So I grew up in Central California, so an area just north of Santa Barbara. My dad actually had a property out in the middle of the backcountry that's surrounded by wilderness, and we all grew up back there. No phone, no electricity, generator for power, everything. And so we grew up really remote, and dirt bikes were really the only way in and out of our property, part of the year. So it was about an hour-and-a-half drive in a car to the nearest town. So, for California, it was extremely remote living.
Wow. And so completely off the grid. And you guys, did you do homeschooling out there, or how did that work?
So my older brother and sister did homeschool, and then when I was old enough to go to school, my parents separated, and so I grew up kind of in town going to school, and then I would spend summers and vacations and stuff back with my dad in the mountains. So we kind of, I had a normal schooling, normal upbringing in that sense, but my whole life was always, of course, different because my dad lived back in the boonies, and it was kind of a adventure just getting in and out of there.
Did you guys have a track there? Were you doing, was it mostly, were you learning to do jumps, and was it competitive, or were you guys just kind of using the bikes to explore and hang out in the woods?
So initially, my dad had always ridden motorcycles, and initially it was for transportation because it would take, like I said, an hour and a half in a car and 30, 45 minutes on a bike. And then certain time of the year, you know, the rain would wash our road out really bad, and you wouldn't be able to get out or in or out in a car. So we had to use motorcycles to get in and out. So that's how it kind of initially started. And then my older sister was a really good rider, and she started racing enduros.
Oh no. Oh no.
I have a feeling that our video is still fine. That Quinn is, that his internet, like you could hear the feedback and stuff, right? Yeah, the connection is good.
I wonder if other people are seeing us.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh.
Yeah, Quinn, let's see.
Send this time.
Yeah. Hey guys, we'll try to get Quinn back up in just a second. We're clearly jinxed with this one.
God, that was such a cool start to the story. Living way off the grid in California, I wasn't expecting that. So let's
yeah, we'll get him back up.
We'll get him back.
The buffering gremlins are back. The buffering gremlins. Hey Quinn.
All right, I'm back.
Yeah, it's your internet this time for some reason.
Yeah, it kicked me off. I don't know. I switched networks, so we'll see if this one works better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I could hear like a bunch of, I had a feeling, I was like, oh no, don't let it go. I could hear the audio feedback and like you were getting a little choppy. I was like, oh no. Okay, we're all good.
We're all good. So we got up to, your sister started getting into enduro racing. And by the way, this is a really cool story. So
dude, it's so cool.
Yeah, living off the grid, using motorcycles to get back to civilization as transportation.
Oh man, it's so neat.
Cool.
I mean, I thought my grandparents have like an 80-acre parcel near Yosemite in Mariposa. It's like super tiny little town.
Yep.
And I thought that was so rad. That's where I started riding when I was a kid. But I'm like, dude, that's amazing. Like an hour and a half off the grid, generator, no electricity. It's so cool.
So your sister starts getting into racing.
Yeah, so my sister started racing kind of enduros here in the Southern California desert. And, you know, we had some friends of ours who started taking her out there and teaching her how to race enduros, because she was a really talented rider, you know, at a really young age. And so she started racing, and she won a bunch of women's championships over the years, and, you know, was kind of top District 37 woman for a long time. And for me growing up, I would just like race around our property and build tracks and jumps and everything else. And I really didn't start racing until I was probably 12, I think.
Oh, you waited until 12?
Yeah.
You didn't start racing until I was 12. Okay.
Well, you know, most kids growing up nowadays, I mean, you see a lot of professional racers, and they're doing it from the time they're, you know, 4 years old and going to amateur motocross nationals.
We heard the same thing when we were talking to Jeremy McGrath. He's like, yeah, I didn't really do my first race until, and I'm expecting to hear like, you know, 30 or something. And he's like, nah.
His BMX career like ended at 15. So he'd already had one career, and then he started a racing career. I love it. You guys started so young. That's amazing. So you're racing at 12. And how much older was your sister?
So I believe she's 7 years older than me.
7 years old. Okay. So you weren't exactly racing against her. You were 12. She was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, got it. And did you know that you were going to be? How did it become apparent to you that this was going to be a thing? You weren't just going to be another kid riding a motorcycle.
I think I was just really competitive growing up. I used to ride around our property and build tracks and basically pretend I was racing, you know, and read magazines, read Dirt Bike Magazine, Dirt Rider and stuff as a little kid. And just like, that's all I really wanted to do growing up.
So you just started like stacking up the local wins. Like when you started racing, did you start winning right away? Was it just like, boom, I'm a champion? Like you knew you had something special then, or was it like a work in progress? Like it took you a while?
It took me a long time. I was like the hillbilly kid showing up at the races.
Oh
my
man,
bikes are all thrashed. They're, I mean, we lived, our property was so remote, and the nearest motorcycle shop was probably 3 hours away. So, I mean, we would rig our bikes together with duct tape and baling wire and whatever it took.
And how did you get from being the hillbilly kid at the track with a cobbled together bike to being on a professional race team?
So, it took a lot of years of kind of, making mistakes, really doing the wrong thing. And it wasn't until I was quite a bit older that I really kind of connected with the right people. And, mainly Johnny Campbell at Honda. He kind of took me in and really helped me out, and, taught me a lot about racing on professional level and racing in Baja and stuff like that. So it really wasn't until I was about 27 that I really kind of took it to a real professional level.
Well, and what were you doing for a career in the meantime?
I mean, I had done all kinds of things growing up. So my dad was an artist, and so he was a stone sculptor, and I grew up working for him, carving stone and doing things like that. And then I had started my own landscape business in between. So I was actually kind of running my own business and, doing landscape construction and things like that. And, I just got to a point when I was in my mid 20s where I was like, I really want to like take a shot at this for a career and move forward with it and see where I can go, because I always had this deep love for motorcycling.
Wow. What year was your first Baja win?
So first win was 2006 at the 1000.
Okay. And was that your first year racing the Baja 1000?
No, so my first Baja 1000 was 2003. Okay. And, I just kind of a hodgepodge team that we put together on our own, just me and a couple buddies, and we kind of fumbled our way through it. And then, the next couple of years I was racing local desert races and Grand Prix and stuff like that. And, like I said, I kind of got connected with Johnny Campbell and American Honda, and, was able to kind of work my way in on that team.
And when did you get with KTM?
So throughout my racing career, I've been really back and forth between KTM and Honda a couple of times. I rode for KTM in 2007. We had the 690 Baja project, which was a factory race program for the 690, which was a brand new bike at the time. The 690 Enduro hadn't really been released. And so we were racing that bike in Baja for 2007 and into 2008. And really, when the financial crisis hit in 2008, that project got completely scrapped. They just closed the doors on all their Baja racing, and kind of put an end to that for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question that's like, I mean, I have some knowledge or understanding of rally racing or the Baja 1000, but I think a lot of people in the adventure or dual sport segment like really don't have much awareness of it at all, or understanding of like how intense is it if you were to explain it to a complete lay person, like going into a desert race, a big desert race like that. I mean, when you talk about a team, I think a lot of people, maybe even a lot of people listening right now, have no idea. Like, what do you mean a team? Like, isn't racing is just you on your bike? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, Baja is probably the craziest race on earth, really. I mean, you're racing, it's a 1,000-mile race. You're racing on open roads. So there's no traffic control. There can be traffic coming at you, animals on the course. None of the roads are closed, so you have to obviously deal with local traffic. It's very, very remote locations, and you need really to do it at the highest level. You need a massive team. I think in 2006, the first year that I won, we had over 100 people down there manning the pit stops, because unlike rally racing, we would run a small tank, basically like an enduro bike tank, and we would need to refuel every 50 miles. So you would come in, they'd have a quick fill ready for you in the middle of nowhere, complete set of spare parts, tires, wheels, anything you needed. And, you know, you'd come in, refuel 10 seconds and you'd be back out. So it's really kind of, to do it at the highest level, it's a very, very big organizational task.
How does that compare to like the Dakar?
So, you know, Dakar is quite a bit different. I mean, it's crazy in its own right, but it's a 14, 15-day race. So the pace is much, much different. You're reading a road book at Dakar, so you have to navigate the whole time. So you have that added element. You also are carrying, you know, 28 liters of fuel, so almost 9 gallons of fuel on your bike, because there's no pit stops, no refueling, and you're basically on your own out there. To where Baja is much faster, more intense, and the whole race is done in one day.
I can't even wrap my head around that. I'm like, I mean, the Baja 1000, they're both nutty, like completely insane, like out there for me to think about someone completing. But man, I mean, the nonstop 1,000-mile one day, holy smokes. Before we get off of the racing topic, because I know you really want to talk about KTM and stuff, I want to ask you about your crash, which I'm sure a lot of people ask about. But I mean, okay, Simon kind of prepared me and told me like Quinn had this gnarly crash in 2012, right?
Which one?
Oh, the Dakar crash I think it was 2012, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I pulled up the YouTube video and I'm sitting right here on this couch by myself this last week. I was like doing my research and I pulled up the video and I was like, holy fuck. I mean, I like jumped away from my laptop. It was like cringe worthy. I curled up in a ball like, oh my God. She was like,
you gotta see this. You gotta see this.
I like ran in the back room. Oh my God, that sort of crash, that violent of a crash is like my worst nightmare. I mean, I spend a lot of time like you were when you were a kid pretending that I'm a racer when I'm riding, like on big, long, cool sport trips. I'm like, actually, you gotta stop doing that. But I that is my worst nightmare. I mean, was that your worst crash? Like, surely the worst one. Yeah, what happened?
I mean, I don't know that was my most spectacular crash, and probably, you know, clearly it was caught on camera, so it was a good one. I've had much worse injuries. I actually got away with that one pretty clean. But yeah, that was a tough one. So that was, I think, third day of Dakar in 2012. We were up in kind of high altitude in Argentina, and I was kind of fighting the dust all day and struggling, and I got a little bit frustrated, and you know, once I got clean air and I got out of the dust, I had already kind of lost my patience, and I was going a little too fast, and just, you know, it caught me out. It was a bad one. I don't really remember what I hit. I just remember waking up on the side of the road and there was a helicopter there, and I was like, you know, couldn't figure out why the helicopter was there. You know, and then I was like trying to get back on my bike and look for my bike, and
oh no,
you're like, we gotta go. We're still racing.
And so, and the French doctors are there, and they're like, no, you're done. So,
What is Romaniacs?
So yeah, Romaniacs, another one. So Red Bull Romaniacs is like a 6-day extreme enduro. It's one of the most challenging races in the world. You know, hard enduro specialist guys like Jarvis and those guys, you know, that's kind of their deal. I got Chris Birch, and I kind of concocted a plan to race Romaniacs on 1090 enduros back in 2017, and
which is crazy.
Yeah, it wasn't the best idea I've ever had, for sure.
Put people on. Just for perspective, what are most people riding in that?
So like 300 two-strokes. That's the bike of choice for hard enduro.
And you guys had the idea to take a 1090 twin.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Reasonable.
Honestly, my thinking was I've always wanted to do Romaniacs. I've always wanted to race it, but I wasn't going to pay to go thousands and thousands of dollars to go to Romania and, race Romaniacs. So I saw an opportunity to be able to go race Romaniacs for free. So I said, okay, if I have to ride a 1090, it's fine. I'm gonna go.
One small catch. One small catch.
So yeah, and then so we kind of came up with the plan. We proposed it to my boss in Austria, and he thought it was totally ridiculous. But Austrians are kind of they like that kind of stuff. So I think he wanted to see us suffer, and so he's like, "Yep, okay, we'll support you guys." And so we put the whole thing together and went to Romania, and we had 2 identical 1090 adventures all built up. And then the day before the race, we were out shooting some photos, and Chris comes back. He crashed, broke his hand.
Oh,
He was out, and
there was one.
Yeah. And Chris was kind of I was just following his lead. I mean, Chris had won Romaniacs before in 2010, and he knew what he's doing. He'd been there, I think, 7 or 8 times. And so I was just going to follow his lead and, hopefully get through it. And then all of a sudden I was completely on my own and, there to fumble my way through.
How did it go?
I mean, we finished. It was some tough days for sure. But, we got the bike to the finish and, amazingly enough, got it done. So.
And that is just starting from the growing up off the grid to the tinkering with the bikes and, keeping them running with chicken wire and showing up at the track and working your landscaping business and all this stuff. And then becoming a professional racer, winning the Baja 4 times, racing in the Dakar, ultimately where you're working for a major manufacturer, getting flown off to Romaniacs to race a 1090 and one of the hard enduro races. I mean, it's just an absolutely incredible story of how you got to where you are right now.
I'm sure a few times during your life you pause, you're like, wow, how did I get here?
Is this happening?
Is this really happening?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Actually, and an interesting transition too, just because we kind of went from the dirt bikes to the adventure bike. But when did you become aware of ADV and adventure riding?
I mean, I've always been kind of involved, riding in Baja and, just basically every time you go to Mexico for pre-running or just riding for fun, I mean, that's an adventure. And, we were building our own kind of small adventures out of XR 650s and, 450 Hondas and KTMs back in, early 2000s. And then in 2007, when I was riding for KTM, I bought a 990 adventure. And, that was kind of my first real adventure bike. And I loved it, of course, had a blast on that. And, with the whole Dakar and Baja stuff, it was just kind of natural for me.
What were some of your early multi-day trips that you did?
So we used to do, me and my old teammate, Kendall Norman, used to do a ride every year. We would just leave we do it in September, which is like the hottest time of the year down in Mexico. We'd go for 2 weeks. We just leave unsupported and ride down to Cabo and back. And, we would just have like backpack with, some trunks and a little bit of food and money. And we would just go and stay at hotels or wherever we could find a place to stay. We didn't really bring camping gear or anything like that, but I mean, it was always the craziest adventure. We'd have the best time, and that kind of prepared us for the 1000 every year, because we were riding 8 hours a day for 2 weeks and exploring all kinds of new stuff. And so just kind of getting acclimated to Mexico and spending the time down there in the heat and humidity really just kind of prepared us for the race every year.
And are you now like camping off the bike or doing the real like dual sport adventure, multi-day, fully unsupported, no hotels kind of trips? Are you interested or doing them?
Yeah, from time to time we'll go out and camp and stuff. And, as part of the development process, we definitely, do stuff like that. I mean, a lot of times it's hard to find time to go and do that for me nowadays, but, I was able to do the California BDR, when they filmed the movie. So I was able to go on that trip, and that was a good time. It was fun, spending that much time out for sure.
So I'd love to get, so how did you get from the racing side of KTM to the business side of KTM?
And also racing, like I want to know also, like, as we're kind of transitioning into this with racing, are you done? I don't personally know the answer to this question. Are you going to continue racing? Are your girls like, is your family part of the reason that you're not racing right now? Are you racing right now? I don't even know the answer to that question. Like,
I'm not really racing unless someone has like a stupid idea to race an adventure bike somewhere or do something like that. But
yeah.
no, I don't go out on the weekends and race desert races or enduros or anything anymore. Just working on motorcycles every day. My whole life is surrounding motorcycles. So on the weekend, a lot of times it's nice just to like step away from motorcycles and do stuff with my girls and my wife and get a little time.
So how did you get so back to getting into the business of motorcycles from the racing of them? How did that transition happen?
So that started, I guess I started at KTM in R&D in 2016. So there's been a R&D facility in Murrieta in California for the last, 16, 17 years on the motocross side. So they've been doing, motocross testing, suspension development, things like that. And they really, our market here had grown for adventure and street and things like that. So they were really looking for someone to kind of head up the on-road testing basically in North America. And I kind of just got connected with John Hines here, and they had talked to me about doing it, and it was kind of a slow process. It took a while. It took a year or two before it really developed into something that they were ready to actually move on. But I started back in 2016 with basically, there was no position that, my position didn't exist. So I had to kind of develop that and build relationships with the factory in Austria and, kind of define how we were going to support the product development here in the US.
What role does the US play relative to Austria? I mean, why are they doing this in the US?
So generally, I mean, our usage for adventure bikes and dual sport bikes is much different than the way they use bikes in Europe. Generally, it's majority of it is on road, and there's not a lot of places. They don't have the land that we have to be able to go out and do a thing like a BDR or go out to the desert on a weekend and ride. So it's just not available to them, and they don't. Most people in Europe don't even fully understand it. And, that was some of the challenge in the beginning with me developing my position, was explaining to these guys, how our customers are using these bikes and, the problems that we're seeing and what our customers want out of an adventure bike.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I mean, we have a fulfillment center in Amsterdam and whatever our small operation is there in Europe, and we hear so much of that. Like, Europeans just want so badly to come here and to ride because we have so much opportunity for adventure and off-road riding, and it's pretty limited there. So that makes a lot of sense to me why Austria might not be exactly the most ideal place for R&D to happen in a container, in a vacuum.
We have. I think we've done some work for BMW, and so we've been over and visited with them in Munich and had similar conversations with them. They're sort of looking at the U.S. market, and we're talking about leaving from our house, and we're out, staying in unmarked campsites and finding arrowheads and gathering firewood and making fires, and it's just completely unheard of.
Day trips into the national forest. They're like, what?
It was also really interesting to hear that that also the US for them is actually, like, adventure bikes in the US is not, we think of the BMW 1200 as being this huge thing in our sport in this place, but actually adventure bike US sales in the broad context of BMW is actually this relatively sort of, I don't want to say small, but it's not the be all end all of motorcycles for BMW. Right? They've got a lot of things on their minds. So I'm interested in how KTM perceives that, because when they create a bike, they have to think about both. They have to sell it in both markets. So it's really interesting to me that they have an R&D facility here. How does that interplay work between the marketing and the sales side and the R&D?
I mean, it's always really difficult to kind of balance the usage because, like you said, I mean, we have people. Germany is a huge market for us, and we have people that load their bikes up with hard cases and head out on the Autobahn for the weekend, and they're going 130 miles an hour, and they never really touch the dirt. And then we have people here that are taking their bikes out and riding them across the desert and jumping them, and so it's two completely different usages, and to try to make a bike work for all these different things is really challenging. And as the demand grows in North America, we get more and more influence, and that's basically what it comes down to is they're not ready to make two separate models at this point in time, but they're definitely they look at our market as a big one, and they see the problems that we have and the things that we come across during testing, and they bring it back into the product. And it may never become an issue in Europe, but we may have issues here in North America, so it's really difficult to balance both.
So do you have an equivalent? I mean, you must have an equivalent in Austria R&D team. Do you find yourself in a situation where like there's a bike project moving forward, and the guys in Austria are saying, make it better on the Autobahn, and you're saying, no, make it better on the single track, and you're sort of trying to change the direction of the train? I mean, is that sort of what's happening?
Yeah, all the time, for sure.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
It's kind of a daily thing, definitely.
I really want to hear about the 790. I know you were really, really involved with that bike sort of from its infancy, or from the idea of the bike. Like how exciting was that for you? How did it begin? I mean, was this literally just like conference room conversations about how does it work? I mean, walk us through, where does it start? Like, you don't have to give us the nitty gritty details, but like, how does dreaming up a new adventure machine, what is like now the most highly acclaimed adventure machine in the market, like I would say anyway. I mean, people are crazy about them, like Spencer Hill, the gear dude on our team. His 790 is like, his prized possession. Like, people love them.
So where did all that start? Where did the ideas,
So, I mean, generally it starts in product management. So they will, they basically come up with requirements for the bike, what they want it to do, what they want to look at, who their target customers are, things like that. It's a lot of kind of boring paperwork and things like that. And then generally it'll go to Kiska, who's our design firm. And Kiska will design the look of the bike, the look and the feel and CTG and stuff like that, roughly, and design a concept.
Is that an in-house? Is that an in-house Kiska, or is Kiska an outside firm?
They're an outside firm in Austria, and they basically do everything for KTM. So I think we're their number one client.
But they're talking about styling, shape, and the form factor, not so much the suspension, the engine.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So then, it goes to R&D, and generally we'll build, like the guys in Austria will build what we call a P0, which is just a cob together prototype. Normally, we'll have an engine, and then they build a chassis around it, and they use existing parts, and they put this thing together just as kind of a proof of concept. And it's usually really rough, really raw, lots of, duct tape and things holding stuff together. And, but it's just to kind of get the feel and set the geometry. They'll have different adjustable steering heads. And so we'll be able to kind of basically set the geometry, the wheelbase, rough outline of suspension travel and things like that in the P0. And then it moves on to P1, which is a little bit more refined. Then from there it goes to P2, where we start getting a few production parts and things like that, and we start doing a little bit more suspension testing. And
are the bikes when you're going from prototype to prototype to prototype, what's happening in between prototypes? Like you have one prototype, the next prototype looks different from that, which means that you've done something, you've tested or you've ridden, or somehow there must be a feedback loop, right? That then gets incorporated into the next one. What does that feedback loop look like before the next one gets built?
It's pretty complicated actually, but I mean, basically we're a test group. So I work for Street Test in Austria. That's what our group is called. And so the lead engineers, they're doing all the design of the bikes, the chassis, swing arms, things like that. We give feedback at every test, and then that gets added to a test report, and they take our overall opinion and adjust it until we come up with a final setting for that stage of prototype. And when we're happy with it at P0, say, it can move on to P1, which would be maybe a hand welded chassis that has the set geometry, so the geometry is not going to change after that. And then the engine power plant is not going to change after that. And there's a few things that are locked in. It's a little bit fluid because, of course, you always run into problems and things like that. But generally, with my testing, I'll go over to Spain quite a lot and test over there with those guys, and kind of give my feedback there, because it can be a little bit quicker. Because usually we won't get like a P0 prototype here in the U.S. because there's normally only one of them.
Right.
Sure. I have a couple of questions really quick. I just want to infuse from the live audience. So Francis Walsh wants to know, he's curious if KTM R+D interacts at all with Husqvarna R+D.
Yeah, we're all one group.
Okay.
So KTM group is KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas now.
Okay.
And basically, we do all the development together. And
at some point between concept, development, testing, at some point those two brands split, right? At some point before they get to the consumer, the branding, the marketing, the design, the sales, the dealerships, where does that split happen?
So I mean, the brand image and the design is definite from the very beginning. So if we're developing a Husqvarna model, it's from the time that comes from product management, it's a Husqvarna.
Oh, okay.
It gets assigned a lead engineer in R&D. But he sits at a desk right next to the guy who's working on the KTM, basically. So
Got it.
It's really interesting.
So I'd love to keep moving through that. We kind of stopped you in the middle of that process, but we were at P0. You were talking about the P0, P1. Keep walking us through that development process. What happens? So what happens? How many rounds of prototypes were we talking about? What is it? How does it get from that to a marketable product?
So, I mean, normally it's about 4 year development process. So go through quite a bit of, refinements and changes and things like that. Once we get to P2, the bike's a little bit more finished, and normally we'll normally get a P2 prototype in the US for testing, and we'll do heat tests, electronics tests, ABS, suspension, all kinds of things like that here in the US.
Are these laboratory tests, or are these field tests, or both?
That's what I was wondering too.
So all of our tests are field tests. So
Okay.
we're 100% rider feel here in the US. We do data recording and things like that, but generally it's always out in the field. R&D in Austria is massive. I mean, I think there's close to 600 people that work there, and they have test benches and shaker tables and acoustic rooms and everything that you can think of at the factory there for the kind of laboratory or test bench stuff.
Okay, so this is like you get a P2 and they're like, okay, go put it to the test, like put it to the real test, take it out on the trail, tell us what you think. Like, where does it fail? Where is it excelling? What could it do better?
Yeah. Basically, it's not quite that loose, but they'll give us a list of different tests that we need to do, whether it's a heat test or a handling test. We do quite a bit of suspension development here in the US for kind of the R model adventures. So we'll test different suspension hardware and things like that before we kind of finalize what's going to go into the production bike.
I mean, but how do you take this feeling of, one of the reasons why I think you're probably quite good at what you do is because of your racing background, growing up with motorcycles, knowing the way you want it to sort of feel. But how do you take that information? I mean, how do they know you go out, you have an experience with a bike, you come back, how do you get that into the scientific sort of data driven thing that the engineers need to make a tweak to the prototype? I mean, how do they know you weren't just having a bad day and it just felt weird, you know?
I mean, that's the beauty of motorcycling, is that, you know, everyone has a different feel, everyone has a different opinion, and you know, there's not necessarily one perfect setting for everything or every person. And, you know, really, we just have to, you know, as a test rider, you have to learn to really kind of filter things out in your mind. Like I said, some of the early prototypes are super raw, so there will be parts rattling around and making noise, and, you know, you have to kind of filter that stuff out, the stuff that's not correct and, you know, is not part of, it's not going to move on to the next stage, and try to just focus on the one thing that you're testing.
Got it. And with the 790, how many rounds of this did you go through?
So, I mean, I started at P0 with the 790 and went all the way through. You know, we have three stages of prototype, so it goes all the way to P3 and then into production.
And are they? I mean, this all just boggles my mind, because, you know, we make luggage, which seems complicated, and apparel, which seems complicated enough to me. But I mean, what about like all the tooling? I mean, is all this stuff being run? They have different production lines in the factory for different models. I mean, this tooling is all custom, right? All these molds, all these parts, like when does that start? You have to finish all the rounds of prototype and then they're like, okay, now we start that? Or is some of this happening concurrently?
Yeah, I mean, it's very complicated, and there's guys that are assigned to just that, to sourcing product and, you know, kind of all of the logistical stuff, costs and things like that, that they just focus on, you know, suppliers and, you know, supply chain issues and things like that. I mean, it's not like we build every single part of the motorcycle there in Madenkoven and, you know, put it all together. I mean, there's parts coming from all over the world, and it's a relatively small factory. I mean, if you go to Madenkoven, I mean, KTM has taken over the whole town. It's out in the middle of the country in Austria, but you've taken over the whole town, but it's still relatively small factory compared to maybe, you know, some of the Japanese factories or something like that. So when production's running full tilt, there will be a line of trucks outside with different suppliers shipping their stuff in, and basically that stuff comes right off the truck and into the production line. And it's you know, it's all,
I love imagining this. Like, it's so crazy. I can think of going to the factory where we make the bags and how that blew my mind. But wow, I can't imagine these semis just sitting out there with, like, this is one part for one bike going onto the production line at KTM. Have you visited while a bike was actually in production?
Yeah. So, I mean, the production line's almost running full time, and a lot of times they run, you know, 2 or 3 shifts. And it's pretty crazy to watch and to think, you know, how they plan all that and how they put the supply chains together to make everything come together on time. And it's really incredible.
And sometimes I think, like, oh man, when you're on a bike with your gear and your bags and your motorcycle, if you could see every single human that it was some way involved with the production of that, touched some part of it, all the way back to like mining the raw materials, the smelting and metal and everything, to the molding, the forming, all the subcontractors, all the assembly lines, making subcomponents. If you could see all of those people in one place, the sewers, the fabric mills, I mean, it'd be an army of like 15,000 people that were involved in, like, more that touched some part of something that's in your bags, on your body, on your bike, to make that experience happen.
Imagine if you had them in a single file line and you wrote how many miles you would have to ride past them.
Right, it would like stretch like across the country or something. I mean, it's wild. Yeah, you could do a whole adventure motorcycle trip just riding down the line of people that it took to get you on the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy in the man hours and everything else that goes into it. And there's so much that people don't ever even think about that goes into development and, you know, bringing it to production.
You know, I'm a little bit conflicted. We're getting a lot of questions in the live chat, which I sort of anticipated with having you on. We would get a lot of questions that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask that. I'm pretty sure Quinn's not going to want to talk about that, or there's not really going to be a great answer. But I do think this is kind of a funny question. It's been asked twice, and then a lot of people giving it a thumbs up and asking for it. So will the 890 look as good as the 901 concept? That's what everybody wants to know. You can just smile. It's okay. I had to at least try. Everybody beat me up in the live chat if I didn't try. So, okay, a better question for you, Quinn.
The detail is never pretty, so they'll just say that.
Okay, great. That's a great answer. So, what are you riding right now? Just when you want to get out on the trail, that's what Mountain Jeep 1395 wants to know.
I mean, I ride everything really. Probably my favorite of all time, if I just want to get out and have fun, is now the 790 Rally. So with the long travel suspension and everything, that's kind of my go-to if I really want to go pound out some miles.
I really feel like I want to get on a 790 like properly. We got a show bike, so we have show bikes that normally travel around, like we've seen you at the KTM Rally, that travel around full time. And we didn't really feel like waiting for a 790 Adventure or R, so we just got the S. And I gotta say, it's like it just feels a little lame. You get on, you're like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel that cool. I mean, the bike itself feels cool. There's something about it that's like, I'm a girl, but it feels like a girl bike.
It's not an R.
It's not an R, and so I really want to get on. We gotta ride one.
So I was wondering about this earlier, and since we came back around to it, I'm gonna ask you. So do the S and the R models sort of reflect that push and pull inside of KTM between the Austrian and American on-road, off-road version of ADV?
A little bit, yeah. I would say that's pretty accurate. I mean, clearly in the US, the R models are much more popular, and we have a hard time kind of keeping them in dealers, and S's are a little bit slower going. And in Europe, I think they're kind of seeing the same thing in Europe now, but generally there's a much larger kind of S style customer in Europe. There's more quantity.
I feel like the S I've always made, it never appealed to me personally, but they always make a lot more sense when I think about the European market. But I didn't really know if that's how it was,
The 790 Adventure, just standard platform, is amazing on the street, and it can do quite a bit off road. It's fun to ride, and it's got a nice low seat height and everything. So I mean, it definitely has some benefits, but I mean, most guys who buy a 790 want to really get out off road on it and
push it. So this is we kind of the question that was asked here sort of illustrated this, but what a little bit about our business and how our development is really sort of a public thing. It's out there for comment. Everybody knows everything we're working on. We get customer feedback throughout. What role does customer feedback play in the KTM development process?
So, I mean, we do quite a bit of just interaction with our customers on the R&D side. From the product management side, it's a little bit different. It's a little more structured. They'll kind of, do surveys and focus groups and things like that. That's a little bit more, I guess, structured and what you see in kind of a corporate environment, to where on the R&D side, we're at the KTM rallies and we're at other rallies, and our Ride Orange demo guys are always kind of interacting with our customers, and so we're taking direct feedback from the customer and trying to develop the bike as best we can to suit most of their needs.
How does that get communicated inside of KTM? Is it sort of, it goes, you receive the feedback, it then becomes a data point in your mind, which then is reflected in the information that you're passing back to Austria? Or is there some other, how does it get flow into the company?
Yeah, it's a big, complicated political system within KTM, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different project leaders. There's a lot of different technical accessory project leaders and people in charge of different things. So really just kind of building those relationships and knowing the right people to talk to at the right time in the development process. And it's something that I've had to learn over the years, is kind of how to maneuver to be able to get your voice heard and have the influence in the right place.
Oh man, I
course,
can imagine like you have to edge your way in so cautiously and carefully, because if you don't approach things the right way and you're like really sure of something, it could be completely lost on deaf ears. Because I can imagine anyway that, like, I was talking about this with the BDR folks the other night, that with the routes that people take ownership over it. So I can only imagine with bikes at KTM how people take ownership over knowing that this is the right way to do it, and yet you have this piece of information that will make a huge difference in the consumer, the appeal to the consumer.
Right, for sure. And building those relationships and the credibility over time, and really coming up with data to back it up is a big thing. Being able to show a test report that shows rider feedback or shows a failure or something like that is really valuable, and getting it to the right person, because really anyone can take a finished product and pick it to pieces and say, oh, this is wrong, and people love to do that, but to actually come up with a solution that is plausible for mass production is a completely different thing. And so, you can't just be like, it has to be this way or it needs to be like this. And you have to really to kind of put thought in it and say, okay, well, what's going to work for production? What can we do? How much can we get? How much improvement can we get out of this? Is it worth the development time? So there's a lot that goes into it.
I feel like with development, there's like, it's this weird mix of like chaos and structure, or like creativity and structure. You have to have both. Like if you just brainstorming all the time and throwing stuff at the wall, nothing will ever get anywhere. But if you're just all structured, whatever you make is gonna be boring as shit. And so you have to have this like process where you're like chaos, creativity, okay, order, structure. And a little bit also with the customer feedback and stuff. I feel like at KTM, like, you can't just be like, oh, that's a great idea, we'll do that. Oh, that's a great, it's not a committee, it's not really crowd development. There must be some inner core at KTM that's like, has a sense of like what's going to work, not only from a business standpoint, but what's awesome, what's badass, where does this need to go? And is there like an owner or someone in the company who's like, how did the 790 project, like was there somebody in the company who's like super passionate about that and just like driving it forward?
I mean, I think it's just kind of in the company's DNA. It's KTM. Like everything we build is to raw to some degree and edgy, and makes the most power, and has the latest technology and best performance. And it's just kind of always the way we've been. And literally, I mean, everyone in the company within R&D rides a motorcycle. So you're never going to find someone at KTM who does not ride a motorcycle. And you go to a lot of other manufacturers, and these people, it's a job to them. They don't really understand what the whole motorcycling community is about. So I think that just transfers through. You see that in our products.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really funny that you just mentioned, the core values, and how like this edge just kind of runs through the company. Like you guys are always doing something that's like out there, that's a little like, gritty and edgy. And we were at the dealership the other day. We were getting like 2-stroke oil or something, and the guy was like, well, is this a performance machine? And I just told him that it was a KTM 250 XCW. I was like, hello, did you not hear me say KTM? Of course it's a performance machine, you dummy.
That was a very strange question.
That was a very strange
We were like,
question.
What?
He was like, wait, you need oil for your two. I'm like, yeah.
For your 2-stroke?
Your weed whacker?
Yeah, right, exactly. Why do you think watching what's happened with KTM over the last decade has been spectacular from a business perspective? What's driving that, do you think? Why are they being so successful right now relative to the rest of the market?
Why is it resonating with the market so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all kind of goes back to the financial crisis. And Mr. Pierre, basically when all the Japanese were pulling back and shutting down, he invested heavily in R&D and development, and just went full force forward, and with the goal really to be the top motorcycle manufacturer in Europe and eventually in the world. And he knew that you're not going to do that without new product, without R&D and development, stuff like that. So I think it's just a big investment on his end, and the investment with the factory race team, and winning Supercross championships with Ryan Dungey, and of course hiring Roger DeCoster, things like that you couldn't have even imagined 15 years ago.
There's a really great question, and we're not going to keep you too much longer, Quinn. Thanks for everybody is loving this, by the way. I mean, people are saying that this is like they're like, well, it's really hard to say. The tour has been great, but I think this is my favorite so far. This is really interesting. I think people are loving getting a sort of peek behind the curtain. The rallies and stuff. Even people who are listening tonight who have met you and spent a few minutes with you hanging out at the KTM Rally, or other folks at KTM. It's not really concentrated time because we're so distracted. There's so much going on, right? And so these live streams allow an opportunity for people to really, it's like a little lurky too. They don't really have to participate too much, but they can get a lot of information. So there's a really great question from John Holman, and he says, are there any thoughts on the demographics of the world, the ADV world in 10 years? Will we see a younger or older trend from a demographic standpoint? What do you think?
So yeah, that's actually a really good question, and we have a lot of data on this as far as demographics, age, income levels, things like that. I can say that the KTM customer generally on the adventure side is about 10 years younger than, say, a BMW customer, and nearly 20 years younger than a Harley Davidson customer. So it's it looks pretty promising for us from that side of things. Another thing that we're also seeing is now with the 790 Adventure, a lot of guys that were more motocross or dual sport guys that rode enduro bikes, EXCs, things like that, are now seeing the possibilities of what you can do on an adventure. And it's not some big, giant, huge bike. It's a bike that they can actually go have fun on, and it feels similar to their EXC or to their motocross bike. So that's bringing in kind of a whole younger crowd to the adventure thing. And maybe it's not your traditional, I don't know, round the world Panyard guy. It's a little more of a hard edge customer. So we're seeing a bit of that as well.
Yeah, I really like that. That sounds like a really positive outlook. And I won't name rallies, but there are definitely, if you compare the demographic at the KTM rally, I think what you just said is right in line with a comparison to other rallies that happen, very large rallies that happen throughout the year, that you wonder, are they even going to be around in 10 or 15, 20 years? Are all those people going to have moved on? And then who's going to follow them? There don't seem to be any young people there. So it's really great. Thank you to KTM for that, for sure.
I want to ask something that I've been asking kind of at the end of these of a bunch of folks that we've talked to in the industry and stuff. And it's related to what you just said, but how do you see the future of adventure riding? And I mean that, it's kind of a two-part question. One, as the sport itself, how do you see the sport developing, the type of riding, the type of equipment, the type of bikes, and then also the business. The second part is, as a business within the broader motorcycle market, how do you see ADV developing as a business? So starting with the sport side of it, how do you see that developing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on with kind of adventure as a sport, with the BDR and things like that. That's something that really makes proper adventure riding very accessible to a large group of people. It's really good for us, and KTM's a big supporter of the BDR and everything they stand for, because there are those people out there who just don't really know where to start, or how to go about getting out and doing it. So it's really a perfect thing. And then on the other hand of it, like we had with the more competitive type adventure rider, I guess you would say, the sport rider, the guys that we see at the KTM Adventure Rally, with our KTM Ultimate Race qualifiers, and I know the Adventure Rally in Julian, they have they have guys going out and it's kind of a scavenger hunt and they're finding waypoints and riding around. So it's like more away from the traditional camping type of adventure riding, but more about getting out and riding terrain that maybe you wouldn't normally ride and exploring on day trips.
Yeah.
And there's so much good riding in this country. I mean, just here in California, you would never know it, but I mean, I ride new stuff all the time that I've never ridden, and just out on a day trip. And so having a bike has a bigger fuel range than an EXC, and but is comfortable enough to ride for long distances on the road is really key to, I think, getting people out and getting them to explore new stuff and things they've never done before.
So do you see a merging a little bit of those two things, the kind of the traveler BDR style rider and the performance guy that you see? Do you see the performance guys doing more of the camping and the camping guys getting more into the sport? Is there sort of a blurring of those two things happening?
Yeah, I mean, for sure it's happening all the time. And I mean, your guys' business is a perfect example with the soft luggage. I mean, 10, 12 years ago, it was pretty much unheard of. Adventure guys had big hard panniers on their bikes, and that was basically all that was available. And so it's really cool to see the more kind of sporty side of the adventure world, and the multi-day trip thing kind of coming together with that kind of stuff. And I'm always a big advocate for that. Anytime we have technical accessory tests or questions about TA, I'm always pushing for soft luggage and getting away from the traditional big heavy metal boxes.
I just listening to you, I feel like some of those ideas have been sort of dancing around in my head, and I got this like shot of adrenaline just listening to you talk, because I just feel like you just nailed it completely. The describing those two segments and like what's happening. I mean, it's exactly what we've been seeing, and I just hadn't heard it like said that concisely before. That was awesome. And what about as a so that's cool. I mean, that's probably going to send me off thinking about all kinds of stuff after the interview. What about as a business? Adventure riding as a business?
I mean, you mean for
in the motorcycle world? We're such a niche right now. We're such a little niche, and dirt bikes is huge, Harleys is huge, sport bikes are huge. What is adventure bikes always going to be like this, like sort of, are we like bike packing in the bike world, or like hut skiing in the ski world? Are we like this really fringy thing, or is this going to become like jogging was fringy, now everybody does it, climbing was fringy, and now it is part of the cultural zeitgeist? Like what role, where's adventure riding as an industry going to go, or in the big picture going to go?
I mean, it's always tough to kind of predict where trends are going and things like that, but from what I'm seeing is that we've seen pretty steady growth over the years, and it seems to be getting more and more popular. There's a lot better motorcycles available now than there were, say, 10 years ago. So just like with the 390 Adventure, having that available to people opens up big doors for people to get in. I mean, for a retail price of $6,200, you can have a
crazy
amazing little adventure bike with TFT display, good brakes, tons of power, good suspension, and it really kind of opens a lot of doors. So I think if our sport's going to grow, it's going to come from new people coming in on bikes like the 390 and even the mid class, the 790. And I think we're probably going to see things trending away from the larger displacement big adventures and going more into the mid class and the single cylinder small bikes.
Do you think ADV could ever compare in scale to cruiser bikes, sport bikes, dirt bikes as a business?
Well, if you look at sales numbers now and you see what Harley has lost in the last couple of years, I mean, if we can pick up 10% of that, then we're doing awesome.
Yeah, when I think about the question, I'm like, God, the roads are not that fun anymore. There's not really anywhere too interesting to explore by road. Like off-road is where it's at. Like you talk about, you know, with the Go West young man and people being inspired to go ride the great roads of America. Well, that's gone. That's like, and that was hardly, you know, podium to stand on, and their inspiration for people. And so now we have this opportunity, and it's like, it's actually a little bit easier than road bikes, I think, because as soon as you get people to taste that like adventure and realize like, man, if people like walking around on their feet and hiking, they're gonna love adventure riding, because you can go way farther and you can see way more stuff than you could ever even in your lifetime see by foot. And so if we can just like get people to taste that, and to also realize that it's like way safer than riding on the roads and stuff. I mean, I don't know, it's like, it's inspiring for me to even like think about that. We could, if we could capture, like you said, 10% of that market.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's kind of a trend in everything right now with people, you know, road cycling, for example. All of a sudden gravel bikes have become a huge thing, and so people want to get out of their comfort zone and get out of the ordinary and go explore something they've never seen before, instead of maybe riding the same road that they've ridden, you know, 200 times or whatever.
It's really neat when you see, I think a lot of people have this perception, like dirt bikers say, oh, these bikes are big and slow and you have all this shit on it. They don't get it. Or people coming from the roadside are like, so you just kind of go in the woods and just go around on gravel roads. And so when you take those people from those two camps and then you actually get them on a trip and you see the light bulb like go off, and they're like, they sort of come on faith. And you get them out there on faith. They're just like, well, if you say it's cool, I believe you. And so they come, and then the light bulb goes off and you can see it. They're like, wow, this is bonkers, you know? And I love seeing that. And I feel like people are migrating. They're going to migrate. They've got to migrate. I mean, it's so good. How could they not migrate into this sport? It's so fun.
For sure.
Obviously, we love it.
I have one last question for you, Quinn, before we let you go. And again, thanks for staying for so long. There is curiosity about the KTM rally in Idaho and whether it's going to happen. What sort of what information can you give us about what's going on internally at KTM about events and the future? Like, what this year might look like? It's hard because none of us know.
Yeah, so I don't know the final answer on that right now. They were supposed to be putting out a release very shortly on it, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to really say the wrong thing, so I'm just gonna say I don't know. I hope it happens, but you know, everything is kind of so fluid right now, and things are happening, you know.
Absolutely. And you personally, I'm really curious, so you and your family, how are things in California loosening up a little bit? Are you thinking about like going out? Do you feel safe and okay going out on day rides, and like morally, does that feel sound to you? Where's your head at with all of this personally?
I mean, where we are here in you know, our area of Southern California, everything's basically business as usual.
Okay.
People are wearing masks to go to the grocery store, but other than that, I mean, it's not much different. We see a lot of people out riding. Motocross tracks are open. You know, I've been out testing, you know, nearly every day the last 2 weeks. So we've been doing a lot of testing and riding, and like I said, people are starting to come back to work here. Maybe some of the office staff will probably stay at home a little bit longer, and you know, because it's convenient for them to work from home. But you know, other than restaurants being closed and things like that, it's not a whole lot different. And I think everybody's kind of adapting to this, you know, new way of doing things.
Is there still a stay-at-home order in California?
You know, it's really odd. There's obviously California has the stay-at-home order and the mask order, but then our county, we live in Riverside County, and I guess 2 weeks ago they lifted the mask order, so they say you don't have to wear a mask in public. You know, you're basically free to go about your business, just do your social distancing and avoid crowds and things like that. So they're kind of giving people the freedom to use their good sense and stay away from other people. And you know, I think the case count in our area is pretty low, so we haven't been impacted that heavily from it.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Quinn. You were so candid and so wonderful, and like fielding the sort of awkward questions or towing the line of like, I'm sure you were balancing a lot internally in your head that we didn't see with like what you can and can't say and how much detail to give. But I think you just did a wonderful job. It was really
that was
interesting,
absolutely riveting
for
I
us,
learned a lot.
and I know everybody at home has really enjoyed this. So thanks for being with us tonight, and hopefully we can ride together soon.
All right. Cool, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks,
We'll
Quinn.
see you soon.
Thanks,
All
man.
right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Okay,
everyone.
no, I'm not ending the
we're
live
not
stream
ending.
yet. I know,
Oh,
I'm changing it up tonight.
Okay,
I put Quinn
great.
in the waiting room. I just wanted to take a minute. I can't actually see, there's some glitch happening with YouTube tonight where I can't see how many people are here or whatever. I've been like monitoring the chat obviously this whole time, but I just really want to say thank you. I know we've said it a million times, but this is just so cool. I mean, the involvement, the intelligent questions, the banter back and forth that happens. And I know, Pete, you don't really see, you see the screen changing the whole time, but
I don't know how you do both.
I've strictly instructed Pete and anybody else who joins us to like not pay attention to what I'm doing, because I think that it's just in general for the interview, it's a lot more engaging if you are focused on the conversation. But we have had so much fun doing this with you all, and I'm really glad that tonight went over as well as it did, because you know, it's an interesting topic. Quinn is a great guy. He's like super open and easy to talk to.
I thought that was great. That was such a neat opportunity to ask those questions. I've really wondered that about these big OEMs. You know, product development is such a huge part of our business. I'm always curious how other people do it, but man, what an incredible, when you think about what it would take to get from an idea to production on a motorcycle, it's just blows my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, what an interesting and ambitious guy for Quinn to like see this opportunity, to know he has this skill and this other perspective that he can offer, and then to go into it and like edge his way in and create a position. I mean, that's huge. Like you can tell he's a little bit of a quiet or reserved guy, but he's very ambitious and clearly a badass on a bike.
Really neat.
So really, really neat. And we're going to miss you guys. But we'll see you again soon. We'll make an announcement about the encore, and get your t-shirt. And everybody stay safe out there. If you're getting back on the trail, do things responsibly, think about the greater good. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks everyone for being part of this.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good night.